Welcome to Northeast Missouri Angler. I'm Dennis. I'm going to talk to you today about some of the gear that I use as far as terminal tackle, how I rig up my rods for both dragging and when I do anchor up. Most of the time I use a Santee Cooper rig or a Carolina rig. Keep it pretty simple. There are a couple things that I use specifically that are starting to come on. A lot of people are using them now. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that. Some of the things you'll need, of course, is line to make leaders out of, put your hooks on. And of course, you got to use a hook. I usually use from a 6 to a 8/0 whisker seeker wide gap hook. It's not an offset hook. It's in line with the shank. It seems to hook up fine. If I do decide I'm having little problems or something, I can offset it myself by taking a pair of pliers, grabbing a hold of it, kind of bending it a little bit. Another thing that I use is I have two setups that I use. I either use a swivel with a clip or I use a sinker slide. And the reason, it just depends on what I'm doing, what kind of bottom it is, which one of these two that I will end up using. Another thing you need is some sort of float. I use just a peg float, 2 or 3 inch. You can use Demon Dragons. They have ones with rattles in them and all that. I just go ahead and use the Whisker Seeker versus a rattle. And I like to use a bead. The reason I use that bead, I use the bead whenever I'm using the sinker slide, just to protect my knot a little bit. And of course you need weight for whatever you're doing. So you're going to need a sinker. If you're fishing from the bank, 9 times out of 10 I'm using just a standard, bank sinker. When I drag, I use these sinkers from DL Sinkers. They make a variety. He makes a variety of colors, 1, 2 ounces, and he's even got some yellow ones he's starting to do. So, and they'll be around the Mark Twain Lake. I think a couple places are going to have them this summer. One thing about dragging, the slinky weights or snake weights or however you want to call them, they are expensive, but they don't get hung up. I mean, if you're going to drag them through, riprap like down below the dam, or in a bunch where there's a bunch of trees and wood and stuff, anything can get snagged up. But just in general, I've drug all over the lake, Lick Creek, Dry Fork, Indian Creek, North Fork, Otter Slough, all them areas. I mean, I've drug all that both in the channels and on the flats, and I still have the same weights that I used last year. I never lost one. So keep that in mind. Yes, they're more expensive, but you use a weight like this and it's going to get hung up on every little thing out there, to where this, when you run into something, log or whatever, it goes right over it. It doesn't, it doesn't get hung up. Or you're trying to drag this on the end of a line, it falls down and you're just going to get hung up. So save yourself some money in the long run and headache, and get some kind of dragging weight. They got different ones. I prefer these. They have pencil weights and different things, drop shot weights that are long, whatever you think works best for you. One thing about circle hooks that I want to stress: when you're using them, you have to snell them. They'll work the other way, but they don't work properly if you don't snell them. So let's go ahead and tie up, and I'll show you how I tie mine up. Without a hook, need some leader line. One thing too, if you lose your tape on these spools, the blue painter's tape works great. And I usually take out about 3 foot, plenty. Just make sure you take out enough. The worst thing is you pull off line, you go to tie, and you tie it, and it's too short. So you got to do it over. So just pull off enough to begin with. Line's not that expensive using monofilaments. Okay, so we got our line. I always start with my hooks the first thing I tie. Whenever you use a circle hook, the whole idea of the hook is that that's what does it. You don't actually set the hook. When as it's pulling out, it'll hook up and turn. So you want to make sure that when you pull, when it's being pulled, it pulls out through the front of the hook, not through the back of the hook. Because you go through the back of the hook, the natural thing for it to do is spin it this way, which you don't want. You want it to take it, pull it into the fish. When the fish bites down, you don't want it to pull away. You want it to pull like this. That way it sets that hook deeper into it. So we're going to start this here. So what you're going to do is take your line, and this is the one I use. You're going to run it through the front, just like it's just down through. And if this is a straight shanked hook, you just run it through like this. So you're going to come from the tip of the hook towards the back of the shank, towards the back of the eye, and run it from front of the hook to the back of the hook. And you're going to make a loop. And you're going to take this loop, and you're just going to grab a hold of it along this shank and just hold it. So right now I've got a loop. I just made a loop. I'm just going to make me a loop. Now I have a loop. Take this tag in, and while holding the loop, you're going to go around it. And what I found is, everybody, you hear people say, oh, go, 10 times. No, you don't need to go 10 times. I'd say 7 or 8, you're good. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to go 8. One more. 8, just for good measure. Okay? Now you're going to take this tag in you have, and you're going to take it through this loop. Just reach through the loop, pull it on through. Okay? Now what you're going to do there is you're going to pull your slack out. You can see it cinching up by pulling both of them. And once you get it to there, you want to pull both of them and slide it up as you go. And that's how you snell that hook. That will not come out. You can pull on it, whatever, you'll break the line before that comes undone. And then just take and snip off this tag in. Just like that. Okay? Now that you got your hook on your line, you want to put on your float. And the reason you got this float is that way when your sinker's holding on the bottom dragging, your bait isn't dragging on the bottom too, to where your hook can get snagged on something. You want to float it up off the bottom as far as you want. Me, I like mine to float about 1 foot off the bottom. 6 inches to 1 foot. So you take your cork, your peg float or your demon dragon, whatever kind of float you want to use, and you put that on your line and put your stopper in there. The next thing for me is I use my rattle. Then, now here's where you put on your swivel, okay? Now when I put a swivel on, I don't snell it. I just use a simple Palomar knot. It's quick, easy, strong. You just make a loop with your line. After you make your loop, you put it through the eyelet, tie a simple overhand knot. Do not cinch this down all the way. Just make it loose like that. Then reach through your loop, grab your swivel. Now you got, and then just pull it tight. You might wet your line. Pull it tight, both ends. There you go. Some people like to take and tie a little extra overhand knot with your tag line. I never really seen it, and I trim mine off a little bit. There. Your pull. Okay. Now basically you have your hook, your float, your rattle, you hear it rattling, and then your leader. Now keep your swivel. Now keep in mind, this is still 3 foot long. Okay. So right now, if I was to put this on a rod, and I have the weight down here, I have the weight down here, and you use these snaps. If you want to put the weight where it doesn't slide without the sinker slide, you can literally at this point just hook that in there, and then when you tie you got your line coming down off your fishing rod over here, tie it up here, right here like this, and that go to your fishing line. Then you'll have this snap. That's where you put your hook, your sinker, excuse me. You put your sinker on this snap, you snap it in. And that's the whole rig right there. That's the rig ready to go. I use the rig wrap boxes, tie these up ahead of time. That way if I break off, which I don't do very often unless I'm bank fishing, anchored up. But even then it's a rarity where I'm using a regular sinker. I'll get hung up more. But for some reason, if you want to change setups, go with a smaller hook, bigger hook, you can just grab this out of that box, tie it on your rod and go. But with a 3-foot leader now, when you're dragging, you're like this, and you got your hook dragging in the air up here behind you. If you drag, you only want to drag no more than a half mile an hour. Usually I like about 0.35 to 0.4. So when you're dragging, it's going to come through, and this is going to be in like this. So with a 3-foot leader, depending on the size of bait you're using, the weight of your hook, and how big your float is, it can be probably 2 feet off the bottom. It may not be, that's why I only, leave about a foot here, because the bait may hang down like that, underneath, and then usually about a 2-foot line. And that'll bring my bait usually about 6-8 inches off the bottom when I'm dragging. And then of course, if you stop, it's going to float straight up if it can support the weight of the bait. The other way I like to do it, instead of using this clip, and the reason why I do it that way is just because you never know whether you're going to anchor or drag, and you're not tying and untying stuff, is instead of using the clip and clipping it to the swivel, I like to use a sinker slide and a bead. And what I'll do, for the sake of showing what I mean, piece of line, okay. Say this is going to my rod, this line here. What I'll do is I'll put my sinker slide on first, and then I'll put my bead on. Put my bead on, and then once again I'll tie that paliber knot. It's quick, it's dirty, gets it done. And then when that's tied on there, then I'll put my sinker on. I'm chasing that bead everywhere. And you do the paliber knot the same way. Except now, you take the whole leader through. But it's the same deal, just take the whole thing through. Pull that tight. There. Okay, now this piece going to the rod. So you put your sinker slide on first, then your bead, then tie it on. And it'll look like that. The reason I'm going to do that, just to protect my knot a little bit. Makes a little click too. And then when I'm fishing from the anchored position, if it's current water, I'll usually use a bank sinker. One thing about when you're anchored up, you do need a little heavier weight than you will when you're dragging. When you're dragging, you want to get it to the bottom using the least amount of weight possible. Because the heavier it is, the harder it's pushing down on the bottom, the more likely it is to get snagged. So you just want it heavy enough to take it to the bottom, but not hold it steady. You know, you're not trying to hold it against current. You're not trying to hold it against current. And then I'll hook on, you know, my bank sinker, you know, whatever. There, that's the rig I use 90% of the time. You know, if I'm anchored up and it's not current, I usually don't use a float. The reason being is it's just sitting up here floating around, and you know, different wind blows right. You know, there is some current even when there's no current. You know, it can get tangled up like that, like it just did there, and you end up with a mess. So I usually don't use a float and when there's not current I'm anchored. Anytime I'm dragging, I have a float on. Okay. Like I said, hook size varies according to what I want to catch. If I'm fishing Mississippi, I'll use 8-ounce weights, bank weights if I'm anchored up, and I'll put, you know, I may use even dragging, you know, if I'm using a piece of bait the size of my fist, you know, like an 8-inch, you know, I go out and you can net a large shad, or even on the Mississippi, you know, I have used the silver carp for bait, and I've used heads bigger than my hand. When that's the case and I need more weight, I'm going to drag. I'll put 2 of these on the clip instead, and then just take a piece of electrical tape and put a piece of electrical tape on each end and in the middle to kind of hold them together. It still moves and works like it should, until I get enough weight to where I can get to the bottom with whatever I'm dragging. Okay, that's it for this week. This is my tip this week. Shows you how I rig my lines, what I use as far as equipment. As far as rod and reels, what I like to use is these Ozark rods. I also have 2 B&M Silver Cat Elites. They're really nice rods. As far as reels go, it's really personal preference. I just use the Bass Pro Shops Cat Maxes. They work good for me. I've had good luck with them. They're cheap. You know, you get one for 60 bucks. Thanks for watching, Northeast Missouri Angler. And until next time, remember, if you like what you watch, hit the little subscribe button and the bell. Hit the bell, it'll notify you when I post a new video. I try to put out at least 1 video a week, sometimes more, but at least 1 a week. Thanks for watching. Until next time.